So hello everybody, welcome to week 2 of the Trailblazers sessions. This series of sessions, for those who might not have been here last week, are a series of 5 sessions across the month of August, all focusing around the area of soft skills. So this is week 2, and just to kind of quickly note, as mentioned last week, just in case anybody wasn't here, we are recording these sessions. All the sessions will be made available most likely somewhere in early September, so that we can release all 5 sessions at the same time. So with that in mind, just want to say, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to post them into the Q&A, which you should be able to access by the little Q&A button on your Zoom desktop screen. Whether you're on desktop or mobile, you should have Q&A available. You can also put in the chat as well if you can't see that button. But it'll be great to keep the chat going and kind of see what people are thinking. But I'm going to pass over to today's speaker, and we have a very special guest speaker with us today. We have a Salesforce MVP in the house with Gordon Lee. So I'm going to pass over to Gordon to introduce himself and kick us off with today's session.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thanks for having me here. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from where you are around the world. Full disclosure, I was having crazy Wi-Fi issues 10 minutes right before this. So if things cut off, Mark does have a backup copy of the slides, but it would give me a second to basically get back on. So just FYI, in case I stop talking for a while, you guys will know that it's because of the great Comcast service I have out here in San Francisco Bay Area. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get this started. And Mark, I just need a verbal confirmation. Can you see my screen, but not the Zoom window?
I can see your screen, yes.
Great, thank you. Give me a second. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to week 2 of this amazing Trailblazers SS soft skills series that Mark has put together. Before I get started, I do want to give a big shout out to Mark. He is the one, this is his brainchild. He is the one who basically rounded us all up and organized us in a way of herding cats and said, hey, it'd be great if we did a series of webinars and sessions all about soft skills. And I am a firm proponent in believing that Salesforce is very good at pumping out all these sessions about technical skills and how to do things like flows and process builders and validation rules and things like that. But when it comes to the soft skills, they have sort of been lacking in this area. And I think that's just because of the fact that there's no one great answer, and they don't want to be held accountable for, obviously, for some of the things that they say. But that's where people like us come in, the people in the community that can basically, work in Salesforce ecosystem, but be outside of the liabilities of what Salesforce would hold us to. So I'm excited to present today on how to handle the 5 personalities in your office. And moving on to the next slide, just for those you guys don't know me, quick introduction. My name is Gordon Lee. I am the director of Salesforce Solutions at Common Sense. It is a nonprofit based out of San Francisco that is aiming to help parents make sense of the digital world that their kids are growing up in. If you have kids or you know of any kids in your life, definitely check us out at commonsense.org. A few facts about me is that I am born and raised in San Francisco. I cannot seem to leave this place no matter how expensive and crazy it gets. I've had 12 plus years in the Salesforce ecosystem. It's been a long time. I was around before certification was even a thing, so that might date me a little bit. I have both for-profit and nonprofit experience, as you can probably see on my LinkedIn profile if you choose to check that out. I am co-leader of the San Francisco nonprofit group, along with my co-leader Jessica Kwok, and I'm MVP class of 2021, 4X certified, 2X Dreamforce speaker, and if you want to get a hold of me on the social media platforms, you have everything here on the right. I'm going to do a quick little plug for my nonprofit group on the bottom right. If you take that URL and pump it in to your browser, you will be able to see the communities experience that my co-leader and I built out for our group. It's a one-stop shop for our group that lets you know all about us and where we meet in our upcoming meeting topics. We actually have a meeting topic tomorrow for those who are interested in checking that out. So let's get into it. So like I alluded to at the beginning of the call here, If you think about the landscape of sort of technical skills and soft skills out in the Salesforce ecosystem, on the left, you've got tons of resources for the technical skills, right? You've got your Trailblazer communities, you've got your Trailhead, you've got David Liu's SF99, you've got Salesforce MVPs like myself, whoever else out there is willing to help you out. If you just do any kind of Googling or any kind of search for Salesforce technical skills of wanting to learn some functionality about Salesforce, it is out there. It is done to death. There's so much information out there. Your problem is actually going to be sifting through the stuff that makes sense to you and speaks to you in your learning style. But when it comes to the soft skills, I honestly can't think of any other session besides the one here that Mark has put together that really addresses all about the human side of working in Salesforce, right? And it's not just Salesforce, it's all about working in general. But you tend to forget as people are getting into this ecosystem of like, oh, I want to learn certifications or I want to get all these super badges, that when it comes down to the actual work, you're actually just using a tool and you're dealing with people. And so how do you actually deal with the people instead of just the technical stuff? Because the technical stuff is easy. When you start off in the ecosystem, I say that it's 90% technology and 10% people. But as you progress through your career, you're going to find that it becomes 90% people and 10% technology. And so the technical skills will help you all with the technology, but the soft skills, it's a little harder to work on. It's a little harder to develop just because of the fact that there's not necessarily a technical playground, obviously, for you to get in there and play with. But I will also posit that the playground that you are is life, is that you actually have done a lot of these things before, and you can actually solve these problems again in your office. And I'll get into that a little bit more here. So let's do a quick definition of soft skills, right? So soft skills are character traits and interpersonal skills that characterizes a person's relationships with other people. Again, this is all about how you work with others and how you motivate them and how you get them to all agree or get into a consensus about a project that you're working on or agree that you're going to move forward towards a certain path. You all know that working in your professionals and also your personal lives, you're going to come across tons of different personalities. This is my attempt to help you maybe templatize or figure out sort of like the top 5 personalities that you'll probably deal with in the office and sort of how to navigate around those relationships to get them to the goal of working together and to where you want them to be. Next. Okay, so let's take a step back for a second. So here are the personalities that you're probably going to end up dealing with. And if you go from left to right, you have dealt with them before and you can do it again. And what I'm going to talk about in this session is what makes them tick, what takes them off, how to get them on your side, and also what to tell them. So if you look in the middle here, and this is the real life example, think about for a second your friends, your family, whoever it is, and you just basically throw out this one simple task, this one simple project, which is let's grab dinner together. Who's in? And I bet all of you right now on the call can picture the 5 or 6 people in your life that would probably fit into each of these personality profiles. You probably got the one person who's like, I don't care. And the other person who's like, everything sucks. And then you've got the other person who's, where are we going? I'm super excited. Just tell me where and I'll be there. And you've got some other people who are probably saying the same things as your Michael Scott or as your Jan. So I want you to keep those people in mind as we go through this session, because I'm going to come back to this concept of like, you've dealt with them before and you can do it again. You have dealt with these people in your life before, in your personal life. If you're talking about grabbing dinner or going to watch a movie or doing anything social together, you know that there's going to be certain personalities that you will have to deal with in order to get them to move towards something, whether that's to agree on a restaurant or agree on a movie, whatever it is, you've dealt with those people. What people seem to have a disconnect with is how do I then make that a transferable skill or transfer that to my office environment? And so this is, again, my attempt at just basically saying, here are the templates of these 5 personalities, and it's going to be overgeneralized because obviously sometimes people are a mixture of certain things, sometimes a little bit of Dwight plus a little bit of Michael, or a little bit of Stan plus a little bit of Jan. Doesn't matter, but you have to figure out what the dominant personality types are and figure out how it fits into these templates, and then you can figure out what makes them tick, how to tick them off, how to get them on your side, and what to tell them in your project. So moving on here. So This is the tale of one project and five personalities. This is actually a real story based off of a project that I've worked on at my organizations. And the project here was all about um, providing a great member experience by reducing the number of clicks that our members had to fill in when they were registering. So that we would ask them to fill in the zip code, and instead of also asking them to fill in your city, your county, your state, or your government official information, which they probably never knew, we would basically automatically fill them in for that using a flow and all those technical things. And I'm not going to get into the how exactly we did with the technical stuff, but the soft skill stuff was all about, okay, we need to get a bunch of people on board and we need to get them trained. The technical stuff is actually really easy. How do we get them excited about this project? So, first off, the first personality that we had to deal with is the indifferent end user. And I'm sure I can't see everyone's heads, but I'm sure there's a lot of people going like this right now, nodding and saying, yes, I know who that person is in my office. And this person will generally be like, hey, how will this help me with my job? So if you think about what makes them tick and what ticks them off and how to get them on your side and what to tell them, as long as it doesn't get in the way of getting their job done, they are okay with using the tool, right? And if you're going to tick them off, you basically want to put them through steps that would waste their time, things like sale pitches, fake people. These people have a very good radar when it comes to when you're trying to pull one over them. So you want to be very direct with them, and you want to just say, hey, instead of having to check every record, you now only need to check the ones where there's no zip codes. Here's a report that shows that. Do you want it sent to you every day or every other week, right? What we're doing here is saying, we're going to make your life super easy. You keep doing what you need to do, but I need your help in just doing this one thing. And so your indifferent end user, right? Think about this person in your life. Think about that person you were just dealing with in your head when it came to the movies or to dinner parties. These are the people who are like, I don't care, but you need to make my life easy. Otherwise, I will rally the troops and say, don't deal with this. All right, next up is your next personality type is your naysayer end user. And this is sort of like on the extreme spectrum of your indifferent end user. And their questions usually are, why are you doing this to me? Because they take this stuff personally, they're very invested in it, and they basically see this as like, you are making my life difficult. But what makes them tick is that they're very driven and insightful and very knowledgeable, right? They do have a pattern of disagreeing, but they value their skill of getting others to see what others aren't thinking of. You know, sometimes you might call this person your contrarian, right? Where they're always playing the devil's advocate. But it's not necessarily a bad thing, but in the right circumstances or in the wrong circumstances in this case, it could actually be a very bad thing. But you have to know how to handle your naysayer end user. Um, Change, what ticks them off is that change is bad, no change is good. They also don't like a lot of change. They already have their processes set in place and they're very rooted in their processes, so they don't want anything that's going to slow them down. But if you can show them in real time the steps for their specific process and incorporate their suggestions that won't break your instance, then you can get them on your side pretty quickly. And so what we told these groups of people is that, listen, this isn't a perfect solution. We know that, right? But it does take care of most of what the organization is looking to accomplish. Can you tell me your thoughts on what might be missing? And that is basically appealing to the fact that they value their skill of getting others to see what others aren't thinking of. And so if they're able to give you some really great suggestions that are low-hanging fruit that you can incorporate quickly, you can quickly get them on your side and then have them move forward with you in the project as well. Next up is your power user. I love these users. These are the people who are basically super excited and willing to nerd out with you on everything Salesforce and how everything works, even if they don't understand everything about it. What makes them tick is that they are the Salesforce experts in their departments. They're usually the ones that you go to say like, hey, I have a question about X, Y, and Z process that so-and-so is working on. Can you tell me how that works, right? They are the ones, picture them in your mind, they are the ones that you usually go to say, I have a question about this, can you tell me about it? And they're the ones more than willing to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes with you on the phone or on a Zoom call to tell you all about it. They are the ones that understand that change is necessary and can be your greatest advocates. These are the ones that can be sort of like your hype team, your marketing team, your internal sort of people that are saying, hey, this tool is amazing, you should give it a try. And they're also willing to help walk certain people through that as well. But if you want to take them off really quickly, what you want to do is omit all the quote unquote behind the scenes details of how something works or making them feel excluded. These are usually, again, the people, even though they're not maybe heavily involved in the Salesforce ecosystem or know everything about it. They want to know how things work. They want to know the lingo of you saying, yeah, I built a custom object. I tied the records to a flow and to automate everything. All the member has to do is give us a zip code, and the rest of the data is automatically populated. They want to hear that stuff because that triggers their learning curiosity in them, and they might want to learn more down the road. So if you treat them like the pseudo junior admins and explain your thinking behind your solutions, they're going to feel like you're bringing them into the fold. If you also give them beta access to features before anyone else, they will feel sort of special before everyone, and they love it. They like being the ones to have their hands on things first, to be the early adopters and figure out what happened. It's that way, if they're the ambassadors for your Salesforce instance, for example, in your organization, and they come across a question where someone asked them, they can either look good or they can know the answers before having to just say, oh, let me go ask the Salesforce team. So I love these users because these are the ones that are also usually the ones that make up your center of excellence, or as we call it at Common Sense, our Salesforce Council. So these are the people that you can always lean on to say, hey, here's this new feature that's coming out. How do you think it's going to work in specifically for your department, and what can we do to get over the hurdles that you think might be coming up? Next up, the boss. All right, everyone hopefully has, well, I think everyone should have one of these in your life at some point. And their question is, how's that project coming along, right? They might not necessarily even remember what you were just working on, but they're like, give me the high level details. So what makes them tick is that they want competent team members who are consistently get the job done, answer questions directly, and help solve pain points for the team, right? They're kind of like no nonsense, right? Like they're involved in what you might be doing, but they don't know exactly what you might be doing, but they just want to know that things are getting done. So if you're meeting with them and you give them too much detail or very complex detail or very highly technical details that they don't care about, they're going to shut off and they're not going to pay attention to you as much. So if you want to get them on your side, understanding that they have people that they report to, right? The boss that they report to, and that they're in these sort of strategy meetings talking about the direction of the organization and whatnot. You want to be able to give them bite-sized talking points that they can present in senior meetings to people who have no clue about Salesforce. I know we're all in a safe space, and I know we all here love Salesforce, and it's hard to imagine that there are people out there who don't love Salesforce as much as we do, but those people do exist, and they're usually the people that are actually just right above you or two levels above you because they might have heard about this thing, but they don't exactly know what's going on. So if you want to get them on your side, you want to give them those bite-sized talking points and also get feedback on the decisions, right? We're basically saying like, hey, it's done, the project's done. Here's the dashboard. I built to summarize the data. Each of these components will track the breakdowns by zip code. Am I missing anything, right? That's the part of basically saying like, I've done X, Y, and Z. Hey boss, what do you think I'm missing? And that gives them the chance to kind of give feedback on your decisions and help you steer in blind spots or things that you might not see. So that is your boss, and I'm sure you guys can all picture who that person is in your mind as well. Your last but not least personality type is going to be your boss's boss. And these people are definitely way more removed. And their question, if you even get to meet with them or if you get it from them in an email, is going to be what project are you talking about? Because they have probably involved in tons of other things, and this might not even be one thing that's on their radar. So what makes these people tick is that they want consistent and reliable teammates or employees who demonstrate a high degree of expertise in what they do, right? If you are not prepared with definitive answers, things like saying like, I don't know and I'm not sure is not going to be helpful to anyone in these conversations. And you need to be able to say something else, such as, I'm not sure about that, or I don't know about that, but I will get back to you and I will follow up and actually follow up. If you want to get them on your side, you need to be prepared with solutions. You've got to bring your A game, and you have to anticipate questions, right? And you have to also produce results that will catch their eye. So when we met with these groups of people, we would tell them, hey, we built a dashboard that summarizes the geographic and government data that we've been trying to get all along. As long as we just require member zip code, everything else is automatically populated, right? You just want to give them the obvious, and then let's see what questions they have, and then be prepared with any of the anticipated answers that you think they might throw your way. The boss's boss, again, like I said, it's hard to believe, but there are lots of people who are not aware of what you are doing every day. They do not care about the fact that you know 4 different ways to do an after save flow, or that you have learned that new trick about the validation rule. They want to know what you are doing and what your projects are working on. Um, helps the organization move forward and how you can help produce results. So you need to talk to them from a very sort of high level way of like, we did this and it produces this. What else do you think we need? Okay. And to summarize, there are things to remember here as key takeaways. You've handled these people before in your personal life, and you can handle them again in your professional life. I am a very big believer of this, in that a lot of the soft skills problems or scenarios that people are always asking about, things like, how do I handle this person in a boardroom meeting, or how do I handle this person in a specific meeting if they keep interrupting, right? Think about how you deal with that in your personal life and how you would be able to transfer that into your professional life. This was my attempt as templates for the personalities you come across most. Again, this is an overgeneralization of the people. Not everyone is just one thing. So you're probably going to come across maybe someone who's sometimes a naysayer, but maybe sometimes they're a power user, right? Like maybe they, for whatever reason, really don't like Salesforce, so they're going to be a naysayer to it all. But the moment you talk about Concur or Expensify or Form Assembly, they might love it, right? So you have to understand the personalities that you're dealing with, as well as the audience, as well as the scenario. And that's the fourth point I have here, which is you need to do the mental homework on your audience and the 4 items below. What makes them tick, what ticks them off, how to get them on your side, and also what to tell them. This is not, I would tell everyone that this is not rocket science, right? This is literally the science of how to deal with interpersonal relationships and how you've dealt with people before. Again, you've dealt with them at some point in your life, whether it be your parents or your friends or your colleagues, but you can figure out how you dealt with that in that situation and what worked and what didn't work and how you would transfer that in your professional life. So I hope you learned something today that moves you forward. I know that we have a bit of time left, and I know last time we had a lot of great, robust discussion in the chats, and I know Mark is probably keeping an eye on that. And thank goodness my Wi-Fi did not cut out, so this is great. So now we're going to move into the Q&A session. Again, thank you all so much. My name is Gordon Lee again. If you want to get a hold of me, there is my Twitter and my LinkedIn. So thank you all so much for coming to this session. And Mark, I'm going to pass it back to you now for any questions that have come in while I was speaking.
That's great. Thanks very much, Gordon. That was a really good presentation. Really liked that, particularly those 4 bits around kind of like what makes them tick, what ticks them off, how to get them on your side. Those were all really good points. I'm sure many of us have experienced variations of those personalities from time to time. Currently, there's not any questions in the Q&A or the chat, but if there are any questions, please feel free to post them in. Alternatively, what we might try, disclaimer to see if it works, is there also should be a raise hand button. It might be on the bit where you click on more and then click on raise hand. But if you have a question, we could also try, if you want, try raising your hand, and I can actually allow people to talk. So if you've got a question, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat or the Q&A. Let's see if we've got coming in. But we've got some really good feedback coming through. So Samantha says, really good presentation. Cheryl says, I love the 4 bullet points. And we do have a question that's in the chat, which is from Manish here. And let me just see. I'm going to try and see if I minimize this a little bit so I can actually read.
I know,
And
I'm like
also
trying to
see
navigate all these things too. There's like so many screens going on. Okay.
Indeed. So Manish, would you like to ask the question, or would you like for me just to share it? I can see if I can let you talk. So Manish, I'm going to see if you can hop on. So let's just see if this will work. Manish, you'll be our litmus test to see whether we can turn people's mics on and have them ask the questions. But I'm going to try that for you now.
Oh, exciting.
There you go.
There goes Manish. Hey, Manish.
Hey, Gordon. Thank you for allowing me to ask the question here. So I just, per your point, mentioned that we should be doing the mental homework, right? Just to understand the kind of personality our boss would be. So my question here, like, is it fine to ask a few personal questions to your manager or boss just to get an idea, like how do they think about particular topics? Because the reason being is that I get a chance to go on a one-on-one with my manager. Uh, but I always feel like in dilemma, should I ask him or not? How does he feel? It may be weird or not, because I believe that just with the professional work, right, we won't be able to get a complete idea of the personality. So, what would your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that is a very good question, Manish. And so this is going to be, forget that we have a global audience sometimes here, Mark. This is kind of like daunting. So this is what I would do, Manish. Here's the thing, right? Human nature is that if you ask somebody how they're going to react in something, they're probably not going to know exactly, right? It's kind of like being like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Like, you don't know what they're going to do unless they're in that situation. To answer your question directly, before I go off on huge tangents here, is that it's really going to depend. Your question about like, how can I ask my boss about these things? It's really going to depend on your culture, your work environment, and the relationship that you have with your boss. And that's going to vary across obviously everyone who's in this call. If you feel like you're in a good place with them and you can say like, hey, I'm wondering like how you would react to this thing, or it's easier if you're saying, hey, I want to do a presentation to X, Y, and Z people. What do you think those people would say? Right? Like if I were to do a presentation to your boss, for example, right, to your boss's boss, what do you think they would say? Because that is where you have to listen and do the mental homework and say like how listening to what their insights on what other people are thinking, as well as how they would approach it, I think would give you sort of a sense of like what they're worried about, as well as what is on their mind. So it's a little roundabout way, but I think, I mean, from my experience, I have to go that way because unless you know, have a boss or someone who's very self-aware, you asking that question to them, it's very hard for someone to answer, right? It's like saying like, Mark, how would you react if you had to do a presentation right now in front of a global audience, right? Like, you don't know how that's going to work until you sort of get in there. But if you can give them this scenario of like, hey, Mark, picture that you're going to be presenting like a huge amount of things at Dreamforce, like, what would you feel? That is it's a better question, but it's still a harder question. I don't know if I answered your question, Manish. I don't know if I was just rambling there for a while, but like, I get where you're coming from. Like, how do you get that without how do you get to the heart of that information, right? And I think a lot of times just asking questions is not going to do it. I think you kind of have to listen to what they say about either real scenarios or hypothetical scenarios and figure out how they react. It's almost like sitting down at a poker table and figuring out what kind of people you're dealing with. And it takes time. It's not going to be a one-time thing. The other I'll just make one more point, and then I'll turn the floor back to Manish here. The other example that someone said to me the other day, which was really great, was um, picture if you were a teenager again and you were asking your parents to borrow the car. You know exactly what your mom would say. You know exactly what your dad would say. You know exactly probably what your siblings would say, and how you have to navigate that in order to make sure that they say yes or say yes to 3 times a week or whatever it is. Manish, I don't know if you can unmute yourself. I don't know if that was
Absolutely.
helpful.
Absolutely, Gordon. Thank you for answering that. Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with the point that it's not a one shot thing. It will take some time, and yeah. Anyhow, given at any particular instant, even I won't be able to answer such questions. That's correct. So I think it will take some time, and just keep observing the behaviors as the time passes by, and which will help, right?
Yeah, one thing that I used to do before this whole pandemic was like I would always try to like, just schedule like even just try to go out for like a quick like sort of social non-threatening office event. Like I'm talking about like just go out for like 15 minutes for half an hour for coffee, for example. Even if you're doing a check-in, which is what our company's really good at. Check-ins don't have to be in the office. Check-ins could just be like you walk somewhere to grab coffee and then come back and that could be your check-in. Right. And that actually just gives you such a different sense a relationship and also just sort of a different interaction instead of just always being in front of a screen or always just sitting down in a very formal setting. I think it's very useful to put people in different situations to see what their human nature is. Because at the end of the day, you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with human nature. It's very complex. There's not going to be a one answer. You're going to have to figure out what exactly works for whoever it is that you're trying to read or trying to get a sense of.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Gordon, thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thanks, Mark, for this opportunity.
No, thank you very much for your question there, Manish. I'm going to pass over to the next person, and I'm going to see Michelle is. Let's see if Michelle's still here, and I'm going to see if Michelle would like to ask her question from the chat here. Michelle, you're on with us. Would you like to ask your question? Would you rather me share that? Okay,
Please go ahead. Yep.
Okay, I'm just gonna read Michelle's question then. The question says, how do you handle people that may be trying to sabotage your efforts on providing misinformation to others?
That's not based on a real life situation at all, right, Michelle? Like you haven't experienced that. That is also a good question. Okay. Whew, that one's a doozy. Because of the fact that you're dealing with someone for whatever reason is going to feel like they're after you. I don't know if that's the case, but I mean, I read that as like it feels like they're coming after you here. Couple things to keep in mind. Okay, this is where you as a professional have to be sort of like the one above and have to be the one that goes high when they go low here, and put the emotions aside. I have to tell myself a lot of times when I deal with those people that this is not personal. For whatever reason, they are lashing out against the tool, the process, whatever it is. But you do have to get to the heart of that matter. Okay, so what I would do is don't tippy toe around it. I'm not saying have a full-on confrontation with this person, but I think it's useful, right? If you're talking about like the naysayer of that Dwight in your mind from the slides, is to really just be honest with them and be like, hey, can we go grab a coffee? Can we have a chat? I feel like you are, for whatever reason, you are hesitant to get on board with this. And I just want to know why. Like, is there something I can do to make your life easier? Is there something about this that you dislike? And when I first started at my organization, I came across a lot of this. And the after a lot of prodding and figuring and having tried to have discussions, it wasn't the fact that it was me who was in charge of Salesforce. It was the fact that it was the organization's sixth time around dealing with Salesforce. And so they had been the one at the forefront of dealing with all these changes over and over again, and they saw it fail 5 other times. So when someone like me came along and was like, hey, Salesforce is amazing and let's do this, they were automatically like, this sucks. Nothing's ever going to work. I've done this before. And so those people you do have to sort of meet head on and sort of curb that, because also depending on their level of influence at the organization, whether they are a senior person or if they are a person on your level or maybe even someone below, you have to handle that differently also, right? Like if you're dealing with a senior person, which I had to deal with, I had to get my boss involved and basically say like, please have a side chat with this person and figure out what's going on. And I need to know so that if I roll this out to her team or to other teams, she's not basically just going to tell them all to not do it, because then that just destroys all your efforts. So you really have to figure out where it is you are with that scenario. But the succinct advice I would give on that is you've got to deal with that. There's no sidestepping that. There's none of this like passive aggressive, like I'm going to build up my coalition and they're going to build up their coalition and we're just going to war. Like that's not going to be helpful. Like you have to figure that out and know what their hurdles are, and then figure out a way to get them on your side, or at least not in your way, right? Some of those people will never be on your side, but if you can at least get them to not be in your way, that's also a win.
Great, thanks for that. And I'm just having to look through. Chinmaya, would you like to ask your question, or shall I see if we'll let you talk? Chinmaya, would you like to answer your question. I hope I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right as well. Apologies if I'm not.
I'm interested too. How do we pronounce that? Is it
Yes.
Chimay?
I'm not getting a response there, so I'm going to just share the question. Oh, hello.
Hi, hi,
Hi.
Mark. Hi, Garan. So
Hi.
I think I pronounced correctly, right?
Yes.
So
How do we pronounce your name?
it's a Chinmay.
Oh, Chinmay.
Chinmay.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
So my question is like, sometimes boss wants to listen those things like he or she thinking in her mind or in his mind. So in that case, how to handle the situation?
You mean, so let me clarify that question. Your question is they only want to hear what they want to hear? Like they're not listening to everything?
Right, right. Like suppose in the work, they want to get it done today, which is not possible, maybe or may not be. Like that situation, you are trying to give the brief or about the work, but they are not going to listen those things. So I want this work get it done today or like that things. So in that situation, like they wants to listen that it's supposed to be done. So in that situation, how to?
Were you, let me ask you this. When this sounds like an interesting, like I feel like there's like a whole story to this. Were you communicative to them and saying like, hey, I'm not gonna hit this deadline, I've got too many things going on? Or were they basically just like, I just need this done?
Yeah, get it done. Like so deadline is everyone knows. Like in professional ways, we know that deadlines, right?
Hmm.
Uh, some kind of situation, boss and leader is different. Like so, sometimes boss will tell you, "Oh no, it's supposed to be done this time." But I just gave you the one example that this kind maybe. This is the example, but the real scenario is like how to handle those things, like what he or she wants to listen from us, so we have to tell them like that.
Is this the type of person who also will be like, this is a priority, like they have several priorities and they tell you and they're like, I need all these things done. Like they basically just like throw a list at you and they're like, I need all these things done.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I know those people. Okay. All right. This again, this is a good example of you've solved this before and you can do this again. Think about, I don't know if you had someone in your life like this, like outside of work, maybe a friend, maybe a parent. For me, it was my mom. Growing up, she was always like, because I was the tech person in the house, even though I was the only one, just because I was the only one who knew how to program the VCR, and that basically like dates me as well for whoever knows what a VCR is. Um, she would also be the one that would be like, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, just get it done, right? And in the beginning, obviously, as the son, you're like, I'm just gonna get it done because obviously, like, I have a lot of stake here. She's my mom, she feeds me, she loves me, blah blah, all this stuff. But after a while, similarly, you just can't keep up with everything because you have your own stuff. Like I have my own things. I was like, I got to do homework. I've got to talk to my friends. Like I can't do all these things. So I figured out after a while is that like what you want actually is just control and knowing that things will get done, right? And so I basically flipped the script and I was like, hey mom, you have these 5 things you need me to do, and you told me they're all high priority. I can only get to 3 of these right now because I still have to do homework, which you said is important. So, what are the 3 things you need me to do by the end of the week? And what are the other 2 things? Basically, I was like flipping it back to them and saying, like, I know you're telling me that all these things are important, but I need you to then, like, if everything's important, nothing's important. So I need you to rank for me. Tell me, like, I have this, this, and this. What do you need me to do? The other approach to this that I've done in the workplace is when I've had a boss who's been like, I need these things done. I'd be like, okay, yesterday, here's the list. Yesterday, you told me that these things are important. Which one do you want me to do first? Right? And basically let them decide. And a lot of times they were like, oh, I told you that yesterday? Oh, I don't need that done. I need you to work on this instead. I'm like, okay, great. Then I don't need to waste my time on that. But it reduces, you've got to basically figure out a way to kind of give them the control and also make your life easier for those specific people because what they're trying to do is basically like dump everything on you and you just cannot keep up. There's just no way. right? So you've got to figure out a way to handle that in a way that says like, I'm still willing to get these things done, but I need you to clarify for me what actually needs to get done, or if what you're saying is just thoughts and I don't actually need to do it. And after a while, you'll get used to it in terms of how they're presenting stuff to you, because they might be like, hey, look into this thing. And then you might be like, oh, if they say look into it, it just means they don't care about it. They want to know about it later. But if they're like, I need this by next week in a very authoritative way, you're like, okay, yeah, I need to work on that. It's human nature. There's no perfect answer to this, right? Again, this isn't like flow or process builder where like, yeah, don't do this like update record in a for loop, right? This is going to be dependent on your people. And so you've got to figure this out for your boss's personality type and figure out what is it that is their driving factor, and then how to make your life easier on that. So I don't know if that, hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great, thanks, Shinmaya. I'm going to have a look through the Q&A again. We've got a few questions left, but I'm also conscious we only have 15 minutes. I'm going to, it does. So I'm going to ask, there's one question has come up, which I'm going to just ask rather than asking Kathy to come off mute for that, which is, I think it's quite a good one, which is, out of those first 5 personalities, which one do you think you are, Gordon?
Oh my God. That's a horrible question, because then we'll just take the rest of the 15 minutes talking about this. I would say, I mean, if we're talking about the context of Salesforce, in the beginning, I was very much the power user. I was like, give me all the documentation. But now I manage a team of 2 day-to-day admins who are very good at everything. So I'm almost actually now more of like the boss, right? In that personality of like, I need you guys to just give me the high level of what you're working on, because I trust that you're dealing with the nuances of understanding that, like, for example, back in the day, Flow can't delete a record. Like, I don't need to know that. I know you know that. I need to know what you're dealing with. So I would say very much now my personality is more of like the boss, whereas before I was very much the power user. Yeah, I'll stop there. Mark, what about you? What do you think your personality type is?
Ooh, I would probably flip between the maybe the boss and the personality type that you have, like, where we going, the power user. I think it depends on day to day what the task is, So like, I imagine that the boss personality, from how you described it, being the kind of almost like sort of like the unofficial requirements gatherer. So kind of like you put something to them and they go, why do we need to do it that way? Or what's the reason for this? And I think that falls as the part of our job description, in terms of, like, for me, as certainly a Salesforce admin, where someone comes up to me and goes, can we have this field on this object? My first question is going to be, why? Obviously, there's better ways to word it than just simply saying why, but I'd be asking, like, wanting a bit more information, like what's the use case for this? What's the benefit to the company for having this information? Is this something that's coming in from our funders, for example? As you know, we are funding you for X. This is, and what field they're asking for is contributing to what they're asking for. So I probably float between those two, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
your inner voice is nicer than mine, because my inner voice is like, why the hell do you want that?
oh,
But yeah.
my was just going. My inner voice suddenly just goes, please no, because I know it's going to take about 8 hours to do, and I only have 5 hours to do it. But we don't say that outside of our own
Yes,
heads.
you don't say that out loud. That's
Yes.
also part of the human nature. Like, you have that inner voice and you're like, you don't say that out loud. I got to figure out a way to reword that to get what I need.
Exactly. So I'm going to pass on to the next question. I'm also trying to address a couple of ones in chat, which I don't think we can answer on air. But there's a question here from Brian. I'm going to give Brian the ability to talk, and I'm going to see if Brian wants to ask his question. That's in the chat, and I believe it's also in the Q&A as well.
Yeah. Hey, Brian.
Hi, Colton. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep, perfect. So I guess I just wanted to ask you a quick question. If you've ever had to deal with a personality who's a combination of a power user and a naysayer. So this character is maybe someone who knows enough to be dangerous, but doesn't know how to implement it. how you would maybe turn that relationship around to a more effective and positive relationship.
Yeah. Wow. I guess I would try to figure out where I would figure out when they're naysayers and when they're power users, and then you need to and then how to address those into those or steer the conversation towards that personality type that you want to address depending on the situation. I'm very interested in this one because it's like they know just enough to be dangerous, but they overall are like, I don't want it. Is that the person you're dealing with?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I don't want to get too too personal on this, but
Yeah.
essentially it's maybe someone who isn't actually maybe suggesting a solution, but maybe knows enough that they don't want that particular option, or just a difficult personality. I would say if I combine a power user and a naysayer, how to deal with them, but I guess it's not an exact science.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I'm just picturing again past experiences if it was someone who actually is primarily a naysayer and they just learned just enough to make their naysayer um, talking points stick more. Right. It's a different
Yeah,
thing if you're just like a naysayer and you're like, I don't like everything, but it's a different thing if you're like, I don't like everything because I read about Salesforce Flow and I heard that it has a limit, it has like a, 1,000 record limit or something like that. Like that's a different approach. Um, yeah, that's a difficult one, Mark. I don't know if that's a difficult one, Brian. I don't know, Mark, if you have any insights on that one, but I would have to like that one. That one would literally, Brian, for me, it would be like I would like, and I've done this, which is that like I would sit down sometimes like by myself or like at a coffee shop or at home or wherever these days, and just sort of think about like what have I seen them in where they're happy? What have I seen them in that they actually are excited about something? And what are things that I've seen them in that they're automatically like, I'm a naysayer, and then like try to figure out a pattern. And sometimes you just have to like just keep observing and listening and not talking. And it's gonna be a bit, but like that's a very interesting. Like, what is I guess I mean, is your goal like, is this you said it was a boss. I think the question disappeared, but I think
mm-hmm.
it was your boss,
Yep.
right? I mean, this is where like, if you have a relationship with them or at least a check-in, I mean, you got to have, I would keep prodding conversations, even if it's a week by week, like one little thing at a time and being like, you know, um, I heard about this thing coming up, like, what are your thoughts? Right? And then just trying to see like how they would react in that situation as much as possible. Even though I know early on I was like, it's hard, but this is where like again, it is a very it's not an exact science, Brian. I think you stumped me pretty good on that one. I'm gonna have to think about that one for a bit. Mark, any insights on your end?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on this one. Going, this one is quite a difficult scenario to actually face. Plenty of people have faced it. I think the crux is trying to find out what works in terms of keeping them. Maybe happy is not the right word for it, but kind of keeping them on their good side, because what you'll find is you've got someone who's a combination of like a naysayer and a power user. They can, as horrible as it sounds, they can become a real pain in your backside in terms of your job if you're not on their good side. And the reality is you could be on their bad side for absolutely nothing in some of those situations. But they will have things that will keep you on their good side, whether it's sending little updates, whether it's just kind of popping them a quick email message going, hi, just to let you know I've done this, or your progress updates, for example, whether that however you communicate in Slack, email, what have you. Actually giving them stuff where they can actually visually see it as well could potentially help. So if you're doing a challenge on a task on, say, doing a big piece of work around your KPIs, for example, and you're building a dashboard as an example, send them a quick email once or twice during that project, which shows the progress that you're doing. Because what managers are always wanting to see is things progressing, and things improving. And if you can evidence that, then that's going to go a long way in them being more on the power user side on the naysayer side. Oftentimes I find with managers that would float between those two categories. The thing that really kind of gets under their skin is if they don't know what you're doing. You know, if they don't know what you're doing, you could be doing the best job in the world, but in their mind, out of sight, you're not doing any work in some regards. So giving them basically updates is really, really good. That's one way, and there are probably other ways as well, but that's the one that comes to my mind. Does that help to answer your question there a bit, Brian?
Yeah, it does. No, thank you guys. It's appreciated.
I like
Great.
Donna's comment that says that sounds like a power user who's a little lazy and used to doing things one way. Sounds like Donna and Brian should connect and share some more stories. Like y'all have some interesting observations to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pass over to. So thanks, Brian, for your question there. There's a question there from Akshay, which I'm actually not going to have us answering this one because I think it might be a bit too. I think it's more of a better as an off-air conversation. Just having a look. Yvonne's got a question in there as well. I'm just looking at the time as well, but I'm going to just ask the question, Yvonne, if that's all right, just to kind of keep us try and get through as many of these questions as we can. So we've only got 5 minutes left. So the question is the 5 personalities you've put here based on your observation? Is it based on observation or your personal experience?
Oh, is it based on a specific model? Yeah, there's no specific model. Nope. Like this is all personal experience of just literally like working in for-profits and nonprofits and dealing with people. And me as the Salesforce person, as I'm sure how you all appreciate, trying to figure out the pattern between the people that you deal with so that if I come across scenarios, I just am able to apply a general template and use it over and over again instead of having to reinvent the wheel. So when I was doing this presentation, I was like, oh, these are actually like the 5 people that I deal with all the time and basically like how I would actually deal with them in a situation. Obviously, like everything varies depending on the situation. But for the most part, like this is just like my attempt at a very unscientific approach. I'm sure there's tons of personality tests that like could speak to this. Very unscientific approach to basically saying like, these are the 5 people, these are the 5 types of people in your office that you're probably dealing with. It's probably also the 5 type of people that you're dealing with in your life. You just don't remember it because you keep thinking about it from the office side versus the personal side, but you've done this before.
Great, James, thanks, Gordon. I think as well, just to very quickly tag on to that, there is a lot of different versions of these kind of ways of thinking out there. You can look at like personality types. There's absolutely tons out there. So there's lots of different versions of it. I'm just having a look through, see if there's any more questions that we can answer in the next bit. Caitlin, I think it's Caitlin. I can't see your full name there, sorry about that. Asks if you've met someone personally, is there a default template of these personality types that you would turn to?
For yourself or for or how you would bucket them? I'm imagining that question is for yourself. If Caitlin is available to answer that.
Let's see, is Caitlin still here? Would you see if Caitlin?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. If it's for your her mic isn't working. If it's for your if it's for myself, no, there's no default personality there. And as I say this, I'm like talking through this. I guess my default personality is like I'm gonna listen and try to see what you're all about, right? Like it's again like personal experiences. It's almost like you meet someone for the first time at a dinner party. You meet someone for the first time at a networking event. If you're talking the entire time, you have no idea who you're dealing with. So if you ask them a couple of questions and you see how they react to certain things and the words that they use, you can kind of see what their misdemeanor is. Like I don't know if anyone here, there was like a scene in a movie, I think it was Hitch, where Kevin James's character goes to like that fancy smashy party, and then there's like immediately like these 2 people who are like basically say that everything is disgusting, and so like he has a read really quickly on those people. So I would say listen and then figure out how to deal with those certain personality types, because this is just like saying, I mean, I take that question as like, how do you know what type of person you're dealing with when you first meet them? Like, I feel like it doesn't have to be a workplace. I feel like it's just in life. Like, you listen and you see how they act in certain situations, and then you decide whether or not they suck. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think with that as well, is like you've got the whole thing of you've got first impressions, but as well with first impressions, they can always be wrong, and they can also be right as well. What so you might need a bit more time to actually get to know that person a little bit before
yeah,
you can
yeah.
fully kind of go to that.
I,
You know,
I
'cause
will. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
not always good. So it was like I just to give a slight sort of like one of the people who I know who's one of my best friends now. When I met him years ago, I didn't particularly think too much of him, to be honest. His personality rubbed me up the wrong way. But
Hmm.
20 years later, he's my best friend. So, you know, these kind of things where you can, because there's a lot of it depend on where you're at personally. You know, if you're in a good place, or depending on as well like your age and things like that. You know, there's lots of different factors which go into first impressions. But that's quite good as well.
I will. Uh, I will close. Well, I'll have one more point, and then I'll see, and then maybe one more question mark if there's time. Well, the title of the presentation was how to handle the 5 personalities in your office. It's not about how to make friends with the 5 personalities in your office, right? Because I think that's like a lofty goal. It's not always going to happen, or you're not going to be the type of person you're not always going to come across people that you're going to want to have a beer with after work or have a social time with after work. But if you can get to a point where you all respect each other and you understand that you're there to do the work and it's not personal and you're not trying to basically sabotage each other, um, then I think that's the goal, right? I mean, I'm on a very different I have a different approach. Like, I love to like be social with people and try to go out there and try to see what makes people tick all the time. But not everyone's all about that, so you can't force them to, right? So you have to figure that out, and how to handle them, not necessarily how to make friends out of everybody. And you got to also remember, even though this is a template that I'm providing you all, it is not by any means of like what Mark just said. Even though they slot in one category in that situation, it doesn't mean that they slot into the same category for every situation. So you've got to it's dynamic. And this is why I can see why Salesforce doesn't do a lot of sessions about this, because it's hard. This is not like a cut and dry answer, unlike your technical skills, where it's very clear what the best practice around Apex code and test classes are. This is not that way. It's a little different. It's because people are complicated. And that's why I'm so thankful that Mark is doing this whole session about like soft skills and like how to deal with all that stuff.
Uh, well, again, thank you very much for having us, Gordon. We are just over time, so just want to say thank you. For those who we haven't gotten through all the questions for, I will be looking to try and put out some content around the questions in the coming weeks as well, just because it'd be good to actually get all of these questions answered as much as we can. And so there is one question in the chat there which I won't answer on air as such, and we don't necessarily have time to go over it, but there is a question there about micromanagement. And just as a little kind of tidbit, I am planning on actually writing a blog about micromanagement coming up. So keep an eye on my blog if you have seen that, which is at Medium under Ragamuffin Admin is called. I'm going to be doing a little bit about that because I have had to deal with that many times over my professional career. So I will be posting something about that in the coming weeks. But just to say as well, there has been some mention about swag and stuff like that. So again, just to kind of reiterate, for those who've been attending the sessions, there is a giveaway, and each time you attend the session, your name gets entered into the giveaway draw, giving you one entry per attendance. So, and that draw will be done after the series is concluded. And those who have signed up and registered, if your name is drawn, I will be getting in touch with you to let you know that you've won. And basically, that's all for the day. So I just want to say again, really big thank you to everybody for coming. Next week we have Joseph Kubon with us, who will be talking around personal identity, which is going to be a really great session. So same time next week with Joseph. And until then, just want to say a big thank you. And again, big thank you to Gordon for being our amazing guest speaker today. So I'm going to stop recording and just say thank you again to everybody.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Thanks, everybody.